Okay, welcome everyone to the sixth session of the Digital Classics London Seminar Series. As you know from previous sessions, this year we are focusing on digital classics more broadly, so not just the Mediterranean, but seminar series. As you know from previous sessions, this year we are focusing on sorry, that was my YouTube video, sorry. So we are focusing on digital classes more broadly, so not just focusing on the Mediterranean, but inviting people from different classical disciplines all over the world and different continents. And for today's session, we are extremely delighted to have Daria Elagina from Hamburg, who is going to speak about modeling vocabulary of digital competencies for the project ENCODE. And she will be also presenting some of her own experience, some of the examples that she has gathered from Ethiopian and Eritrean written artifacts, which I am really excited to hear about. And so before she starts speaking, I would just like to remind everyone that if you are watching this session live, you can leave your comments normally in the chat feature under the screen or on the site. And any questions, or just saying hi, hello, and telling us where are you watching it from. We'll be very happy to read those, and we will bring those in the discussion session at the end. Also, just to say hello to the co-organizers who are watching today with us, and I'll hand over to Daria.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Thank you for this kind introduction and for the possibility of presenting today on my topic. I'm Daria Elagina. I'm an associate researcher at the University of Hamburg, and I work for two projects, for the project Bettermetzahecht and for the project ENCODE. And today I'm going to present you modeling vocabulary of digital competences for the project ENCODE. I'm very sorry, my PowerPoint seems to be working very slowly. Oh, but now we have it. So let's have a look at the outline of my presentation. So first, I will introduce you to the project ENCODE and to the basics of its vocabulary. Then we will speak also on the concept of a competence as used in our project. We will have a look at the structure of the vocabulary and how these vocabulary work within our database. Then I will speak on the elaboration and development of this vocabulary, and at the end I would like to share with you a questionnaire which would help to foster our project. So let's first have a look at what ENCODE project is and what does vocabulary of digital competences is meant for. So as we all know, digital technologies are rapidly gaining ground in academia. However, one should admit that many students and scholars perfectly trained in humanities might still lack needed digital competences to foster their career and research. ENCODE, which is a 3-year Erasmus Strategic Partnership for Higher Education funded by European Union, aims at bridging this existing gap in the teaching-learning domain of ancient writing cultures between the peculiar humanistic training and now essential digital competences required for study, research, and employment. ENCODE brings together 6 partners from 4 European countries: Università di Bologna, Universität Würzburg, KU Leuven, Universität di Parma, Universität Hamburg, Universität Oslo. One of the main intellectual outputs of the project will be shared definitions of digital competences needed by graduate students in the programs focusing on written cultural heritage. To provide these shared definitions, a multi-level digitally born vocabulary has been designed based on two existing frameworks. The vocabulary is modeled using Simple Knowledge Organization System as RDF. The presented vocabulary structure is a result of a cooperative work of the project team members and is available as a project online application. To achieve shared definitions of digital competences, dedicated consultations with a selected group of stakeholders, employers, academic staff, and recent graduates have been carried out. The achieved shared definitions will, in its turn, orient subsequent transnational training activities, impact on training strategies and methodologies. The results of the training will be again discussed with the stakeholders to improve the understanding of digital competences in our domain. Training graduates and scholars into digital methodologies has been object of research which highlights several issues. One of that issues is that the digital skills are detached from the core competences mastered by students in history, heritage studies, classics, and oriental studies. On the other hand, it was noticed that acquiring of specific digital competences might also improve and widen existing humanistic competences. Here I will quote observations by Borod and Stoyanova, which they have done on the experience of teaching EpiDoc. However, their observations are of course transferable to other education modules or disciplinary focuses. So they say, the parallels between the methods and outcomes in the teaching of EpiDoc, as detailed in this chapter, and the teaching of traditional documentary disciplines, such as epigraphy, lead to some interesting observations. Both are highly technical sets of skills, but involve deeply interpretive materials, require a balance of precision and flexibility, and engage with the community of practice and reference materials. As we have observed, teaching the two skill sets in parallel would bring tangible benefits to students, and although the unidisciplinary nature of most university degree modules seems to delimit the practicality of such a unified approach at the moment. This quotation illustrates the first statement, that digital competences are detached from disciplinary competences in learning process. The second quotation refers to the observation that acquiring digital competences contributes to the development of disciplinary competences. So, Borod and Stoyanov write, there are a number of benefits that come with EpiDoc training, aside from simply being able to do EpiDoc. Even if students don't go on to work on an EpiDoc-based project, they have acquired a set of valuable transferable skills beyond the realm of digital epigraphy. Structured way of thinking about and producing data, management of complex sets of information, and collaborative project work. One such crucial skill in the realm of research is approaching one subject of study, in our case epigraphy, from outside one's comfort zone, being able to look, question, and explore it from different perspectives based on different bases, needs, and project objectives. For instance, digital encoding of data and semantics often involves the disambiguation of concepts that prose descriptions express in a fuzzy way. This need to disambiguate is not always comfortable. Scholars complain of spurious exactitude when asked to express early 4th century as a figure. For example, the attention this forces us to pay to our own writing can only be valuable, however. In order to reflect this interconnection of digital and disciplinary competences, the vocabulary of the project ENCODE contains several conceptual levels. There are two core concepts, competences and focuses. Competences are distributed according to the competence areas and to the levels of proficiency. There are digital and disciplinary competences, or in other words, humanistic competences. Competences might be incoming and outgoing. The incoming competences are those which are required for a specific educational module or a position. The outgoing competences are those which are acquired in a specific educational module or in any other qualification process. Focuses represent another conceptual entity, which refers to the areas of application of the competences, such as different disciplines, languages, or particular digital skills. Before we have a closer look at the structure of the vocabulary, let us discuss the concept of competence as it is used in the frames of the ENCODE project. Basically, ENCODE applies the concept of a competence and learning outcomes in the terminology of the project tuning educational structures in Europe. The terminology is summarized in Competence and Learning Outcomes, Panacea for Understanding the New Role of Higher Education by Robert Wagener in Tuning Journal for Higher Education. He states that the tuning's understanding of the concept of competence has inherited a lot from the definition by Walter Hutmacher, who stated that the notion of competency lies very firmly within the field of knowing how, rather than knowing that. The definition of the competence within the tuning project thus fits the definition by Hutmacher, which says, competency is a general capability based on knowledge, experience, values, dispositions which a person has developed through involvement with educational practices. Competences cannot be reduced to factual knowledge or routines. To be competent is not always synonymous with being knowledgeable or cultivated. Wagener underlines that there is a huge confusion, sometimes provoked by linguistic difficulties, between the terms of competence, learning outcome, learning objective. He himself provides with the following definitions. Competences should be understood as a dynamic representation of demonstrated knowledge, understanding, insight, comprehension, subject-specific and generic intellectual, practical, and interpersonal skills and ethical values. They cover the whole spectrum of capabilities from pure theoretical and methodological knowledge to vocational knowledge, insight, and from research abilities to practical abilities. Fostering these competences is the subject of all educational programs. Competences are formed during the process of learning by the student in succeeding course units or modules and are assessed at different stages. Competences are therefore owned by the student or learner. A learning outcome is understood as a statement of what a learner is expected to know, understand, and be able to demonstrate after completion of the process of learning. Learning outcomes indicate the level of competence that is desired and should be achieved. They are, in other words, the specifications of the results and outcomes of a learning process. Despite all these challenges in terminology, I will just summarize that the concept of competence might be used as a common denominator in defining learning outcomes, required qualification for participation in learning module, required qualification for a job, or for self-assessment. Our vocabulary of digital competences is an integrative part of the database of the project ENCODE, which is a database of educational modules, persons, and openings connected to the fields of digital methods in the study of ancient writing cultures. Since the project aims at providing with shared definitions of digital competences, the concept of a competence plays a central role in the database. Thus, we have such entities as modules for educational modules, openings for academic jobs in the field of ancient writing cultures, persons for any actors involved, for example, in the process of education and knowledge transmission, and competences, which bind all other entities together. As you can see on the screen, the concept of a competence plays a central role in the ontology. Now let's have a look at the structure of our vocabulary. Coming back to the structure, I need to say that modeling of competences have been based on existing frameworks. DigComp2.0 for digital competences and CALOHEE framework for disciplinary competences. The initial interconnection scheme of digital and disciplinary competences was outlined by Università di Bologna research team. Thanks to their participation in the CALOHEE project, they have transferred to other partners of the ENCODE project expertise on the tuning methodology, on the subject area qualifications reference frameworks for history and humanities and its intersection with the digital competence framework for citizens, DigComp2.1. DigComp2.1, the Digital Competences Framework for Citizens, has become a conceptual model for description of digital competences in our vocabulary. DigComp was developed by the Joint Research Center as a scientific project and with intensive consultation of stakeholders. DigComp has become a reference for the development and strategic planning of digital competence initiatives both at European and member state level. The DigComp framework has 5 dimensions. Dimension 1, competence areas identified to be part of digital competence. Dimension 2, competence descriptors and titles. Dimension 3, proficiency levels for each competence, 8 in number. Dimension 4, knowledge, skills, and attitudes applicable to each competence. Dimension 5, examples of use, applicability of the competence to different purposes. 3 of them, Dimension 1, Dimension 2, and Dimension 3, are reflected in our vocabulary. Dimension 5 should be reflected by associating particular competences with job or educational module descriptions. The DigComp2.1 framework is referred to in our vocabulary as a SCOS concept scheme, which is viewed as an aggregation of SCOS concepts. Adding a SCOS and scheme relation to all the concepts within this framework, we define them as a distinct conceptual framework and delimit them from other entities. Digital competence is defined as a top concept in the DigComp concept scheme. Further main concepts are competence area, competence descriptor, proficiency level, and an association of a particular digital competence with a level. This is again a tabular summary of dimensions represented in DigComp2.1, 3 of which, dimension 1, 2, and 3, are reflected in our vocabulary. Here you can see that the competence area refers to a broader context of application of digital competences. Dimension 2, competence descriptor, identifies competences of a given competence area. Each of these competences can be associated with different levels of proficiency. Each competence area is defined as a separate SCOS concept with hierarchical relations to the concept of a competence area in general and to the concept scheme DigComp2.1. The same is applicable for competence descriptors, which are also linked to the corresponding competence area. Each level of proficiency is defined as a separate concept in our vocabulary as well. Here you have an example of encode this concept with some properties, preferred label, and notes, and its relations to the broader concept of a proficiency level and to the concept scheme of DigComp2.1. Each association of a competence, of a digital competence with a level of proficiency is also modeled as a separate SCOS concept. Now let's move to the modeling of disciplinary competences, which is based on the CALOHEE framework. The CALOHEE consortium, measuring and comparing achievements of learning outcomes in higher education in Europe, provided with conceptual qualifications and assessment frameworks for 5 subject areas chosen to represent significant academic domains, including humanities. The subject area qualifications reference frameworks are the outcomes of elaborations by groups of stakeholders and are meant to serve as a sound basis for defining the program learning outcomes of individual degree programs. The descriptors in the reference frameworks are organized on the basis of dimensions. A dimension indicates a constructive key element which defines a subject area. Each subject area is based on a multiple of dimensions. Each dimension involves 3 descriptors: knowledge, skills, and autonomy and responsibility, wider competences, which reflect a progressive level of achievement. All elements of the CALOHEE framework referred to in the vocabulary are again aggregated under SCOS concept scheme CALOHEE. Each level of proficiency is modeled as a separate SCOS concept. Here we have, for example, level 6 skill. And the same is applicable to the modeling of a specific competence dimension. For example, text and context in this example. Consequently, each dimension and level association have also been modeled separately. Focuses, which represent a specific area of competences application and are another conceptual level in our vocabulary, also aggregated under a common SCOS concept scheme. Project-specific concepts are aggregated under this cross-concept scheme, Ancient Writing Cultures. Here we document those concepts which have been introduced into the vocabulary by our project. The examples within the concept scheme are concepts for incoming and outgoing competences. From the structured vocabulary, let us move to its application in the database of the project. So, for example, if there is a job with a description of specific competences which are required for this job, the database would suggest the modules which deliver the same competences if available. In our case, we have, for example, an opening for ENCODE of Ethiopic manuscripts description in TI-XML, and the modules which deliver the required competences. In the case of an educational module, in the case of person, I've skipped. In the case of person, the application might suggest modules which deliver the same competences which a particular person has. In our case, we have, for example, Pietro Luzzo, and if you want to be like him, so here are the modules. And in case of an educational module, our application suggests related educational modules which deliver same or comparable competences to allow for better choice opportunities. Speaking on elaboration development of the vocabulary, I want to touch upon different points. There's basically one big recognizable problem in the application of the vocabulary, that is the lack of a unified understanding of digital competences and of the association with levels, and lack of a reference model in the context of writing ancient cultures. That's why I have proposed to enhance the vocabulary with my own descriptions within SCOS Node for some digital competences. My examples are based on my own experience, which is more or less limited to the field of the study of written artifacts of Ethiopia and Eritrea. I have collected my experience in the course of an almost 10-year affiliation with the Hugh Center for Ethiopian and Eritrean Studies. During these years, I had a possibility to observe or even participate to a number of projects connected to the field of digital humanities. For example, Betamitsahef project, which aims at creating a research environment for the study of written culture of Ethiopia and Eritrea, and focuses on describing manuscripts, inscriptions, and producing text editions in TI-XML. Project Traces, which focused on linguistical annotation of digital text and included also development of an innovative annotation tool from scratch. And Ethiosphere project, which aimed at digitization of Ethiopian written artifacts in situ. So my procedure was of my reflection on the digital competences needed in the field of writing ancient cultures, I was as following. I took the template table of DigComp2.0, and first I have tried to think about examples for single competence dimensions. As for developing of digital content, I thought of production or annotation of a digital text. Then I tried to think of different levels of that competence, starting from some basic skills I used exclusively. So from my basic skills, like, for example, using standard text processes with very simple annotation, then moving to specialized text processes such as critical text editor or a very basic level of markup with XML, and so on. Like, I used really exclusively my own experience gathered during my studies and work as a research associate. And eventually, I also thought of competences which I would like to acquire, and thus I ended up with development of an innovative markup scheme, innovative adjustments of the existing standards. Another example of digital content creation I have picked up is digitization of physical objects. This activity is especially relevant for the field of Ethiopian studies, since there are still thousands of non-documented, non-digitized written artifacts, or artifacts which need a more thorough digitization. Here again, I based my progressive level description on my individual experience and on the work conducted by Ethiosphere project, which was focused on digitization of Ethiopic written artifacts. So again, I started from a very basic way of digitization for one's own use, for some private research purposes, and progressed to production of reusable digital images of fragile, endangered objects, digitization of written objects within their context of use, and so on. Of course, all these descriptions are based on my own experience and understanding, and they are not meant to be universal, but should provide the starting point for a discussion. Consequently, I have added a skills note on development of digital content in the context of ancient writing culture. So here I have added text production or text annotation to the developing digital content. And then again, to the association of a particular competence with a level. In this case, this is Developing Digital Content Foundation 1. I have added a skills note with my own description, standard text processes with simple annotation, for example, word styles, not a good wording, but it is as it is. Another way of dealing with definitions of digital competences is self-assessment. On the 28th of May this year, there was an intensive training conducted by Pietro Juzzo in the frames of the project ENCODE. The training was dedicated to linked open data for written artifacts based on Ethiopian manuscripts and inscriptions. The training was held at the Hugo Center for Ethiopian and Eritrean Studies of the University of Hamburg, in cooperation with the Better Mizrahi project. At the very beginning, we have asked all applicants to fill in an empty DigComp2.1 table template to describe their competences according to their self-assessment. The same procedure was encouraged at the very end of the training to document the progress. I have here a screenshot from my own table, since I also participated to the training. I have evaluated my competence in the development of digital content at the intermediate level, since I already had an understanding of different formats and I was able to develop content for my own research purposes. And as the result of the training, I have added to these competence also understanding of principles of creating ontologies. This way of reflection on the digital competences needed in our domain is, however, highly individual, if we don't have any other reference model. But again, this might provide with a solid ground for development of a shared understanding. Of course, there has been and are also other projects which are dedicated to creation of related vocabularies and taxonomies. Those vocabularies and taxonomies might be linked to the ENCODE vocabulary to provide additional system of cross-referencing and to serve a better understanding of digital competences in the domain of ancient writing cultures. Here I have an example of the Tajira Taxonomy, which is taxonomy of digital research activities in the humanities. And I want to say many thanks to Alton Barker, who has drawn my attention to this taxonomy. The authors write on that taxonomy as follows. The taxonomy of digital research activities in the humanities has been developed for use by community-driven sites and projects that aim to structure information relevant to digital humanities and make it more easily discoverable. The taxonomy is expected to be particularly useful to endeavors aiming to collect information on digital humanities tools, methods, projects, or readings. And I should say that although this taxonomy does not describe competences. It is indeed an important binding element between digital and humanistic competences, because single digital research activities might be linked to the corresponding digital and disciplinary competences, thus revealing their interconnection. However, I should say that the taxonomy is very detailed and complicated, and its linking to the vocabulary of our digital competences requires a lot of reflection and analysis. So I have taken, for example, a digital research activity tagging, and I have tried to think of which digital and which disciplinary competences are required for this activity. And I ended up choosing developing digital content intermediate 3 within the scope of digital competences, which means this intermediate 3 level corresponds to understanding and ability of working on your own. And in the realm of disciplinary competences, I have picked up the source analysis competence at the level 7 knowledge, which means focused knowledge and critical understanding of relevant data and sources of their associated conceptual framework. Consequently, I have linked this digital activity to the corresponding digital competence, to the association of a specific digital competency and the level. And the same I did for the disciplinary competence, in our case, source analysis, level 7 knowledge. Speaking on this elaboration and development of the vocabulary and linking our vocabulary to existing vocabularies and taxonomies, I should say that it's, on the one hand, it is a very powerful tool because it provides with a better understanding of the competences required in the field of digital humanities and their interconnection with the actual research activities. It serves also for a better visibility of the ENCODE project and provides the ground for future cross-referencing. However, this linking to related vocabularies and taxonomies requires not only a lot of reflection and analysis, but also shared definitions for the concept of a competence and also for other concepts. And at the very end, I would like to share with you the questionnaire of our project, which is dedicated to competences, learning outcomes, and best practices in teaching and learning digital competences. And we would be very happy if you would find time and reply to these 22 questions, which would help us to improve our project and to collect your feedback. And now I understand that I was, as usual, talking too fast. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay, so thank you so much. That was brilliant. And you weren't talking so fast. It was quite easy to follow.
Okay, I was just a little bit concerned because actually when I did my rehearsal, it was 40 minutes and now I understood that I was too fast. I'm so sorry for that.
No, it was okay. Don't worry. So I don't know if any of the panel members have any questions. I have one little comment and one question. One comment, which is, I think that these sort of vocabularies are super interesting and super important because being able to name the competencies that we need is kind of the first step to be aware of that they exist. Because sometimes, especially in digital humanities, we as researchers start doing things and using things like text encoding or text editor or ontology mapping and stuff. So we start doing those things without knowing that that's actually a digital competence that's going to help us to further develop our research. So that's really interesting. And also I wanted to just ask a little question, because I have been following the project and I was in the conference in May and I saw there was a lot of interest. So are you already what's the perception of the attendance? Are you starting to realize there is interest into the vocabulary? Are they starting to use it in any ways, especially people involved with teaching? Or
I don't have now any feedback on whether our vocabulary has already been used by anyone except by us. But I think that this is okay because it is also still at the very beginning of its development. So now we have this intersection of digital competences and humanistic competences, but as I have told you, we don't have any definition. So we're still, what is actually developing digital content foundation one? What is it? So I would say that this is development of digital content with some tools which are known to mostly everybody, but the person knows how to apply them for his or her own research. But there would be someone else to know this is not foundation one. Foundation one is already being able to do your edition in critical text editor or being able to encode in XML. So we don't have this this understanding of what we actually want to define as these different levels of competences. On the other hand, within our project, we use this vocabulary intensively. So when we put our educational modules in the database, so we'd also try to reflect on it, and our partners also deliver us information on their educational modules, on their association with these competences. But here again, I can see that there is still a lot of lack of understanding, lack of common understanding. So it was also when we shared these tables, of digital competences within the participants to the training. It was very interesting to see that there were no intersection between the applicants. Like really, everyone has its own his or her own understanding of these levels, and of what the competences actually stay for. So I should say our project is using the vocabulary. I have not heard of any usage outside our project, but I think that the conference was really very lively and vivid, and I think that there has been a lot of positive feedback, especially after the roundtable.
Yeah. The roundtable was really interesting. Yeah, I loved it. I don't know, Gabi or Valeria, do you have any comments or questions?
I could. While we wait for maybe questions from our audience. No, just I will start with a comment about what you just said, that there was not a lot of agreement on how to define a particular level of competence. And I think it's always difficult to define, but I was thinking that, for example, in the teaching of foreign languages, people have come to a sort of standardization of these kind of competences. And even if it is, very fluid, I think it is, possible to agree or maybe even impose a little bit of a standardization. So I'm really confident that you will manage to achieve that. And my question is, if you could tell us a little bit more about, you said that these classes that this vocabulary you're using can be quite nuanced and quite complex, and that sometimes the mapping requires a lot of thinking, which is understandable. And if you could tell us a little bit more about what you think is the right balance between having a very nuanced vocabulary and having something that is easy to use for people that might not be extremely familiar with ontologies, or might not have the time or the resources to do all the thinking that is required at the moment.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that this is a very important point, because if we also, when I came up to all these other vocabularies and taxonomies which are already existing, and I have tried to map them, I have understood that it is such a huge task, and at the end the question is whether it will really improve the result, or whether it will make it even less understandable and readable. I think that we basically we might think of probably merging some concepts which already exist in the vocabulary to maybe to have more clarity. Yeah, because now the Calorie framework and the DigComp, they are both very complicated frameworks, yeah, with different dimensions and different levels, and there is no intersection actually between also the levels, or at least I cannot see them. And maybe that if we come at the end that we don't need 8 levels for digital competences, but we might have, for example, 6 or 5 or whatever, which would cover but much broader spectrum of competences, that this might be much more practical. But also these different dimensions of creating digital content, or developing digital content, or there are different stages, different grades, and maybe also putting them together would be not a bad idea, because basically development and creating of digital content, well, there might be different tasks, but they are very interconnected. Once you have created digital content, you will also develop this digital content. Otherwise, why have you done it? So I think that, of course, in the course of time, we might come to this idea of conflating some of these concepts together to have a better understanding, to have much more strict system. And at the end, I think the most important thing here is that it will be usable, so that people can really have a look and understand, well, if I want to foster my career, if I want to achieve something, there are these competences I need to acquire. And here are the modules which will deliver me this understanding. So probably not something you would use later in your career, but very related competences, which will, at the end, give you an opportunity to learn new competences. So I think that at the end, I think that some sort of simplification would also be needed. But again, first we have to understand what digital competences are.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I really enjoyed that presentation, and obviously I've heard of the ENCODE project before, and you know, it's a very important project and everything. I was also thinking about this question of calibrating these competences, because you know, asking someone to assess their own competence, I think, is a bit like asking someone to assess, you know, their pain level on a scale of 1 to 10 in a you know, which you know, different people are going to say different things, you know, for without necessarily being very, very well calibrated. And I'd also thought, as Valeria brought up, the comparison of language teaching, where we have got sort of calibration from having, you know, tested this in the classroom, and you know, we know what you know, level 3 means, broadly speaking. And so I was sort of going to ask, and it probably the same answer to what you just answered to Valeria, but I was sort of going to ask what, to what degree, you know, you think calibrating in that way people's self-assessment against classroom assessment by instructors has taken place and has been useful and has helped to sort of narrow down what these levels of competence mean. But I guess the bigger question is how, given the range of different types of skills that we're talking about in the ENCODE project, how possible even is it to really calibrate these things? What does a level 6 mean in someone studying Epidoc, for example, and what does it mean in someone studying a very different discipline? I mean, I am often quite concerned at the beginning of, for example, teaching an Epidoc workshop to know what people's competence level is. But there are only really 3 levels of competence that we can answer, which is, are they complete beginners? They've never typed an angle bracket before. Are they very competent already and are just here really to interact with other people who are also working on this? They've marked up hundreds of texts and they're very confident. Or are they somewhere in between? And everything in between is really hard to subdivide. And not all disciplines are that mushy, of course, but so I just wondered. I mean, so sorry, that was a very long-winded way of asking the question of how much actual calibration do you think is possible of these things, so that a 6 means the same across different people and different disciplines?
Yeah, thank you so much. This is a very important question. Like, of course, within this DigComp2.1, there are some descriptions for levels. So, like remembering with guidance, then remembering on your own, and then and so on. So basically, there are some basic understanding of the levels. So I think that if one is able to work in Epidoc on his or her own, but is not able to develop this schema, so this is, or is not able to introduce someone else into the working process. This could be a very important factor. On the other side, I think that the self-assessment, not by a teacher, but really your self-assessment, could be a very important tool if we have enough people who do that. So we would at least understand where are the limits, where are the borders. Okay, very beginners, clear, but what is actually the highest level of a competence? What does it mean? And if we have information from different people working in different projects with different tools, and then they can describe what their competences actually are, we can at least have first the range of this level, and then have a look. Like, I think that really this working on your own and being creative could be a very important thing, and or being able to instruct someone. So very important key elements, because one can be really able to work on, I am able to work on my own in TI, but I'm not able to develop a schema. So maybe I will, but it will take me 3 weeks, and I mean, like, and so on. So I think that this is a very important. What I can actually achieve with my competence. Can I do this only for me? Can I also give an advice to someone else and be creative at this moment, so that I can develop my own ideas on that? Can I bring the encoding to another level, to another conceptual level? So something that no one has done before, then this is probably level God, and so on. So we can maybe make like 80 levels of digital competences. But I really believe that if we collect data from as many people as possible, also from students and so on, we would then really be able to calibrate it. And comparing it with languages, it is more or less like that. So you are able to translate something with a dictionary, or you need instructions for someone, or you can already speak by yourself on a very basic level, so for your own needs, or you can already read Goethe in original, and you can understand everything. So, or you can write really text in this language, So it is comparable, and just needs a lot of experience, and it needs a lot of people who are really eager to share their understanding and their experience. But then in the end, I think this would be very interesting to see that probably, and like some people are too humble and they say, oh, I'm just a beginner, I can't do anything, I have just done like, I don't know, 5 projects, but this is like nothing. There are people who are much better. And on the other hand, there are of course people who estimate their competences in another way. But I think that if we have a lot of people, at the end we would have this average. It's like also with pain, yeah, like 1 to 10. Of course, there are people who are not really very sensitive to pain, and there are people who are overly sensitive. But most of people, more or less, have the same reaction of the body and the same, more or less the same understanding. So I think that it's really about statistics somehow. If we can speak about statistics in our field, this is another question. If we would have enough.
Let's not forget the self-assessment of instructors as well. So I think one of the differences in a lot of the digital skills that we're all involved in teaching and learning is that to be a language teacher, you have to be at the maximum level of confidence before you start teaching. It would be irresponsible otherwise. Whereas for teaching, digital skills, I don't think you need to be. And certainly for some of the things I teach, I'm nowhere near, level 8. I'm much more around 5 or 6. But it's sort of fine in terms of, what aspect of it we're teaching. So I think, are you looking for self-assessment from instructors as well?
No, I think that we have not done it yet, but I think it's a very good idea on the one hand. On the other hand, maybe also they cross some kind of a cross assessment, yeah, when like, which I think I would be okay with that. So if I would do my self-assessment, and then I would ask someone else to do that as well, based on experience and based on what I have done and so on. This could also be of a great help just to understand what are actually our criteria. But concerning the instructors, I think, yeah, this is very important, but we have to create an extra questionnaire for instructors to understand what. But I think that if someone is already so advanced to be able to introduce someone to the topic, not simply, I think that there could also be very different instructors. Yeah, I also had an experience of introducing a colleague of mine in our TI for Better Metzerheft, and of course it was very practical. So I could give him like tricks like you can do like that, here you can copy paste, here you can do this and that, which is also competence at the end. Yeah, so I can speed up encoding of a manuscript description if I know some tricks how to do it in a faster way. But on the other hand, I was not able, I think, to actually explain how everything is working, and what is the principles behind it, and how to do it on your own if you want to have your own project, how to do this and that. So instructors are also very different. Some of them are just teaching how to cheat sometimes, so, or very practical things, yeah, very minor things as well. And I've taken, for example, my training, like my participation to the training in May by Pietro, who was actually introducing a lot of very like extremely fundamental stuff, yeah. And this is a very different way of instruction, yeah. When you you don't get a receipt, but you get an idea, you receive an understanding where you can have a look at it and how to manage it on your own. So instructions would also be very, very different.
Okay, I was just gonna say that similar examples of assessment are very common, because I remember when I started the PhD, I had to do an assessment of my research competencies, like giving examples of what things I could do or I could not, so that I could develop in those areas or look for training or similar stuff. So I think something like this for people dealing with digital humanities or that are starting a PhD or any study on digital humanities would be really, really useful to see where you are at and where you want to go. So yeah. And we had one comment question from Leonard Barr, which takes us nicely into discussing what are the next steps. So what are you planning for the coming months?
Well, I think that my next step would be developing this digital vocabulary further, like integrating my own descriptions into the vocabulary, integrating also linking it to other vocabularies, but because at the end I can't delete what is not needed, but it is good to have it already there to be able to share it with others and to receive a feedback, what I'm doing wrong, what I'm doing right, and I should say that this would be my priority in the coming months to keep doing what I'm doing right now, and I hope that also we also depend somehow on the content of the database, because if we have, the more modules we have, the more openings we have, the more people reflect on which competences are needed for what, the more feedback we get, and the more examples for a particular competence we have. And so this is the way probably that in which we can develop this understanding, when people really have a look and they link this particular module to this particular competence, and the next person comes and also already has some examples, of this application, maybe. So this is my idea. But many greetings to Leo. I know that he was going to watch.
So we need to remind the form that you show the link to for people to give feedback as well, so that we can.
Yeah, that would really help us to collect some more information, and really it will be very useful for the project.
Okay, so I think we are close here to the time. Just to remind everybody that next session will be on the 6th of August with Kyle Thompson, speaking about the utilization of SFM and RRTI to study ancient Egyptian statuary reuse. And after that, we will be having more seminars in autumn and winter, like every 2 months or so. So if you want to have more information, yes, go to the link where you could see all the following seminars. And I think that's all for today. Thank you very much, Daria. That was really, really interesting.
Thank you.
Brilliant presentation, and the conversation and the discussions were great. So thank you
so much.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for coming, and hopefully see you on the 6th of August.